Hey everybody, and welcome to Eco Convos with Dan. I'm really excited to bring you this one. This is our first episode. So this time we met with Aaron Mears from Lulu's Perch Permaculture. We talked everything from permaculture, his work with the living classroom. We even snuck a little bit of BioDynamics in there too. It's a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy. I'm sure you will. Talk to you soon. Welcome to Eco Convos with Dan. I'm your host, Dan Vanderhook, and we are here live tonight in Century 21 Platinum Agents. I'm here with my guest, Aaron Mears. Aaron has been around in the permaculture world for a little while now, after starting off a little bit of, had a bit of time in Jordan and doing all sorts of stuff from nursing and teaching and whatnot. And now all of a sudden has become this permaculture guru with property running over at Lulu's Perch, and even starting off the living classroom.
Well, I didn't start it, but we brought it into the Queensland, or the state of Queensland.
So, I think I want to talk about the learning classroom a little bit more.
Yeah.
But whereabouts did things start for you? So
Good
you
question.
obviously, growing up Sydney, and mate, what got you to this point to start with? It's going to be a bit of a long answer, I reckon.
Okay, it's a good question because where did it actually start? And I think it started when I was a nurse, because I was a mental health nurse for the better part of 10 years.
Yeah.
And as a nurse, we would have all sorts of patients come in. You see the saddest and the funniest sometimes as well. You got all the different stories in between. But what I did notice is that we're getting a lot of rural and remote patients from like Western New South Wales coming into our mental health ward, and we're on like a coastal mental health service. And we're like, what's going on here? And we had all these farmers coming in from the rural and remote areas. And coming in with sort of like depression and suicidal ideation. And the doctors would just say secondary to situational crisis.
So that doesn't really get to anything, does it?
No, not at all. So I remember just sitting down and saying, well, what's this situation that the doctor's writing, just situational crisis? What's the situation?
Yeah.
And you just see, grown men break down and say it's the drought. If it's not the drought, it's the flood.
Yeah.
And then they're under the thumb from big banks and agricultural companies and chemical pesticides. They're just on this sort of financial treadmill.
Yeah,
and
so you certainly see that a lot everywhere as well. I grew up in Western Queensland too, and so having that, that was an issue. Your neighbours are struggling with, your family struggling with yourself, and it certainly takes its toll.
Oh, big time, and so much so that the only way out, people see there's a really dark pathway that they take. And so to have them in the mental health services and then say that, I'm thinking to myself, well, there must be something that can be done. And it just so happened that I happened to be in the Amazon jungle of all places.
Bit of a leap.
Yeah. So now we're in the Amazon jungle, and I was at a place that was kind of a mix between Westerners and Indigenous folk in the Amazon there. And there were all these cut and burnt, slashed and burnt areas of the Amazon with illegal lumber,
illegal forestry stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And illegal felling of trees, and there's these entire areas that had just been clear felled, and they were regenerating it with this sort of weird pattern in the landscape. And I remember looking at it, saying, "What on earth is that?" And one of the guys said, "Oh, it's permaculture." And I was like, okay, interesting. And that word just like had a ring to it that, probably still resonates with me today. And he said, when you go back to Sydney, look up permaculture and look up a guy called Geoff Lawton. Yep. And so I've done exactly that. Looked up Geoff Lawton. I saw his documentary called The Greening the Desert.
Yep, that's fascinating.
It is.
Absolutely,
it really is. It's a fantastic case study of being able to grow food 300 meters below sea level, next to the Dead Sea, on a salt flat in the Jordanian desert with little to no rainfall whatsoever. And you think that's the hardest place to grow food in the world. And if they're growing food there, it can be done anywhere.
That's it.
And so I saw that documentary, and I remember taking it into the mental health ward and showing these farmers this documentary. I remember taking it to the living room. I had my laptop and everything. Yeah. And just to see the spark of hope come back in someone's eyes just from watching a documentary, no medications involved, just they needed hope. Yeah. And that documentary gave them hope. And I remember saying to myself, there's more to it, and I want to do something along these lines.
I think that's awesome. And that's not really even, that's taken to that level where it's not even actually they may not have even had gone through and done anything themselves with that, but just making that difference, show that there is something possible. Like I said, giving them that hope that it's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
Which for so many of them, it really felt that way.
Yeah, and there's a cultural shift that happens inside someone's heart where they may have been farming a certain particular way because their fathers taught them how to do that.
Generational farming.
Exactly. It's generational farming, and it takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage for the farmer who's in the present to say, hang on, I think we might be doing this a little bit wrong and we could be doing it a different way, because then there's a fear of the ostracism from all the other farmers, the ostracism from their own family. Are you going to go against the legacy type thing?
That is a real fear, and it certainly happens.
Yeah,
you hear of that sort of stuff happening. The benefit, I think, from what I've heard in a lot of cases is there is that ostracism, there is that bit of blowback that comes from neighbours and from family.
Yeah,
and then things start to change. That's I've certainly seen that with a couple of different places in the area here. And when people start, really, it's almost pioneering a concept.
You're a pioneer plant embodied in human form. So
that's it.
It's like I think the old adage is first they laugh at you, and then they hate you and they get angry at you, and then they ask you how you did it.
Yeah, exactly right. So you've gone from working as a nurse, and then heard of this permaculture thing.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there? So because you've now gone. Did you go into, was it teaching after that?
So I went into Sydney Uni to become a teacher. I studied for 5 years to be an English and history teacher. That's what I was interested in at the time. And then, so once I heard about Geoff Lawton's, he was doing a permaculture design course, and I thought I've been teaching some of my patients and other people this stuff that I've been just scouring off YouTube. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if I could do the permaculture design course and then embody that as a teaching practice? And he put online, if you can tell me which one of my documentaries you like the best and why, I'll consider you for a scholarship.
Yeah.
And so I wrote exactly why. I took your Greening the Desert documentary, and I've been showing it to patients in the mental health ward. We have a problem with farmer depression out here, and I want to take this to the next level.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks later, and thousands of comments later, he got back to me and said, I want to give you a scholarship. So I did my permaculture design course with Geoff, and then I did my internship with him in the Greening the Desert site at Jordan. So I came full circle to the inspiration.
Actually went to Jordan and did that there. That's just that would have been an incredible experience, in doing, not even just because of what you were doing. I mean, that would have been an incredible experience for you personally.
Jordan's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And to go to the site itself and see how all the practices are put into place. And, if you can grow food basically in a salt flat, we can grow food absolutely anywhere in Australia.
Yeah. So when I can't remember when Geoff Lawton started that project in the first place.
Oh no, I'm not sure either. I'm to throw a random number out there, I'd say 15, 20 years maybe.
Yeah. That's unreal. So okay, so you got yourself you got your scholarship. Now, what sort of what sort of costing would there normally be, whether it's for Geoff's course or is there much of an outlay for people?
There's a small outlay. The way I like to look at it is some people buy their house and their property before they do a permaculture course, and they're willing to outlay $600, $700, maybe over $1 million for a property. And then when it comes to doing a permaculture course, it's only it can be anywhere between $1,000 and maybe $3,000.
Yeah.
But then to work out, if you had done the permaculture course before you bought the property, you may have gone through a completely different process and a different checklist and chosen a completely different property altogether.
That's interesting. Hey, that's a
so it's worth putting in this small investment,
as
opposed to $1 million investment afterwards. because what tends to happen is people can panic buy and they got to quickly buy a property.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they've only, they buy it sight unseen, which is happening a lot these days. Absolutely. They may have seen it from Google Earth and they just go, oh, that looks like a beautiful paddock. And then when they get there, it's all, 25% slopes everywhere.
Yeah.
And they realize that that's not viable to start, turning into a food growing system. And then, that's when their journey starts. They start it on the back foot.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, invest in a permaculture design course. It might be anywhere between, $1,000 to $3,000, depending on the course. Yeah. And then you will avoid so many pitfalls in the property purchasing phase of your life. You can basically give your real estate agent a checklist.
Yeah.
I want north facing. I want it with good, good rainfall. I want it. Does that already have water tanks? Does it have flat areas for me to, to grow food on?
Yeah.
Rather than just going sight unseen, I'm going to go for it.
That's right. I mean, I think, and that's one of the things that comes with obviously with any sort of course you go through is obviously you're learning different ways of looking at stuff, and that's obviously what happens through a permaculture design course as well, along with everything else. But if you're that way inclined and you've already got your property, so there's still hope.
There's always hope.
You can
just set yourself up for more success if you do the course first.
Certainly.
But if you've already got a property, anyone can still do it.
Yeah. Okay. So, mate, you've gone over and worked with Geoff, mm-hmm. and what happened from there? So you come back and that became something you were then chasing full time, or?
Well, now that I'd done the course, my mum and I decided to go, invest in a property together.
Yeah.
And I took my permaculture checklist with me, and we booked a real estate agent. We said, give us all these attributes of a property and don't show us anything else. We're not interested. Yep. Which is a lot of this is 5 or 6 years ago, and a lot of real estate agents hadn't really been approached like that before. Yep. It was more of we weren't interested in the house.
Yeah,
my mum was a little bit. I'm just interested in the landscape.
Yeah.
And so to give them a checklist and say, I need it to tick these boxes and don't show me anything else. We put them to work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly something. Obviously being what I'm doing. It's certainly something that's becoming a bit more frequent. Where people are doing exactly that. They've got their checklist. They say these are the things we're looking for.
Yeah.
Please don't waste my time with anything else.
Yeah.
And running with that sort of option and opportunity. I'm personally trying to get into that frame where I could be the go-to person for that. And not necessarily I'm not trying to plug what I do here.
Yeah.
But that's certainly something that I know people are starting to do. So it's not that unheard of for you to go to your real estate agent and say, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So what sort of things were on your checklist?
So definitely on my checklist, I'm in the southern hemisphere, so I want it north facing.
Yep.
If I was in the northern hemisphere, I'd want it south facing.
So can you for people who may not know why, can you explain that a little bit?
So when a property is north facing, you're going to get maximum solar pathways.
Yep.
So you're going to get more sun. If you're on the southern side of a mountain slope, you're going to get less sun, and then obviously vegetables need sun for photosynthesis.
Of course.
So if you've got too much sun, that's actually a great problem to have, because then you can always grow more shade, and there's plenty of pioneer trees that you can shoot up in half a year and get the shade that you need.
Yeah.
So you got the north facing slope. You want to be in an area with substantial rainfall. Yep. You want to check soil conditions. Are you just going to be there on hard pan clay? Being able to build up soil. What's the topsoil like already? Prevailing winds. What's the water holding capacity of the landscape?
Yeah.
And not just in the landscape, but also do they have rainwater tanks? Is that going to be an investment that you're going to have to put in afterwards?
Yeah.
Good shed spaces and flat arable land that you can actually to work. So you want to check all the slopes of the landscape as well. If it's too steep all the way around, you're kind of fighting uphill.
Yeah.
But if everything's gentle slopes, flat areas, there's plenty of room to work with that.
To make it work. So you obviously found the place?
Yes, and it's called Lulu's Perch, and we found a place in Pimbaran.
Yep.
And it was a 5-acre property that was all ornamental. So the previous owners had everything was ornamental. They'd been around the world and picked plenty of bromeliads, which you know, each their own. So it's been a slow process of I haven't used any machines. It's all just elbow grease.
Yep.
And a shovel and a wheelbarrow and doing the earthworks and planting all the pioneer species that I need for that garden. I'm slowly converting it into a fully functioning permaculture food growing system.
So is that we've heard the term bandied around a little bit as a food forest. Is that the aim for what you were looking for, or were you looking for essentially production over anything else?
Well, the beautiful thing about permaculture is you have separate zones not separate zones, but you have zones that you put on your property, and the things that you want closest to your house, what you call zone 1. So it could be like your herb garden, a small veggie garden, a little composting area, and then you zone 2. They're all things that you want to that need the most visitation during the day. That you don't want to have to walk all the way across the property to keep checking. And so once you start getting to zone 2, then you got your bigger market gardens and your staple crops. Then you start to get to zone 3, which is the beginnings of like your fruit orchards and your food forest. And then zone 4, more of your harvesting timbers. And then zone 5 is just like wildlife. So food forestry is just one component that is incorporated into the permaculture system. And it's not just a food forest for people, but it's for every single creature from up in the sky, all the way through the mammals, to the insects, to the microorganisms and the mycelium fungus under the ground. You're designing a forest to feed every strata level.
So that's I think that's where where it comes into the idea of no pesticides, nothing else, no chemical additions or anything like that. I think that part of it for me was always the exciting part of looking further into just your organic farming practices to start with, let alone actually taking those next steps towards permaculture or anything along those lines. So when you're saying it's about being able to feed every level of the strata, so that's leaving stuff. That's saying well, we've got insects coming into into our garden, actually producing enough for everything.
Because when you're incorporating, we create resilience with biodiversity. So you speak to any other farmer who's doing monoculture. They plant one particular crop, which takes one particular mineral out of the soil, which brings one particular pest, which requires one particular pesticide, and they get stuck on this monocultured loop. But once you bring biodiversity in there, and you've got plants that are now offsetting minerals and nutrients to other plants, and you start creating these guilds of plants that are attracting other insects that are now predators for the initial insect. The biodiversity is key, because you don't see much monoculture in nature itself.
No, certainly not.
So we're mimicking nature. It's a form of biomimicry, taking what nature has already done. It's a 2 billion year old research and development lab. We might as well copy it with no patents. So we might as well copy and plagiarize what she has already done. So it's just observing and interacting nature and working out how it does it, so we do it.
That's right. I mean, that's absolutely exciting. How you can do that. I find one of those things. You talk to people. I know I certainly did it myself. Was not knowing anything about what I was doing. Starting something with my kids, and started building up the home garden, because that's what you're supposed to do, and that's how great for their upbringing and whatnot. And it was fantastic. But I remember my son being absolutely devastated when his first crop of corn was full of ants. Ants loved it. And I know as a parent, and all of a sudden, I've upset my kid. All I want to do is know how to get rid of these bloody ants, and straight away, all the chemical options start coming out. I think one of the exciting things about permaculture for me personally is, that pure natural way of doing things. Everything has its process and everything has its way of working. and that's something that it is teachable. It is something you can learn.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at insects and pests in inverted commas,
Yep.
If you look at them as the cleanup crew and the indicators of what's happening in the soil, you start to see your garden from a completely different perspective.
Definitely.
Because what's happening in soil, the soil is basically the stomach for the plant kingdom.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the digestion happens. And so what's happening in the stomach is then affecting what's happening in the plant. So whatever it's deficient in starts to show on the plant itself. And I remember doing Graham Sate's course at Nutritech Solutions, and he was talking about how bugs have antenna on their head, not just so they don't bump their head in the middle of the night. It's not just there just to keep them going and not bump into anything. It's actually an antenna that can pick up on certain frequencies, and plants give off infrared frequencies.
Yeah.
And if a plant is diseased in its health, it gives off a particular frequency. If it's very healthy, it gives off a brighter, much stronger frequency.
A bit like a heart monitor.
Yeah,
really, yeah.
Totally. And a diseased plant will give off like a staccatoed signal. And so insects just home in on that particular plant.
Yeah.
And the way I like to describe it to the kids is, you've got a robber, and there's one bank, or there's two banks, and one bank has the full security, the vault, the security guards, the barbed wire fence and cameras. It's impenetrable. And then you got the other bank on the other hand, who has an open vault, no fences, no one's even tending to it. Which one is the robber going to steal from? And they go, obviously the one with the vault that's open.
Yeah.
That's the same with a plant with a mineral deficiency. It has no protection and defense mechanisms. So the bugs go straight for that one, as opposed to a plant that's come from healthy soil, has all the minerals and all the nutrient and trace elements that it needs to protect itself.
Yeah.
The pests will eventually go straight for the other one.
Yeah. So by just having, building a healthy garden, you're actually building a resilient garden as well.
Yeah, it's all in the soil. When I do my permaculture design course at Lulu's Perch, everything is soil, because our whole human race depends on this tiny thin film that's around the planet, and that's just topsoil. That's where all our life comes from, either actively or passively. All life comes from topsoil.
It's such an important thing. I think I've started actually talking to people selling their larger acreage properties, and you're talking to them, and quite often I'm a cattle farmer, or I run horses, or this is what I'm cropping at the moment. When the conversation has started to change from so many people I've started talking to as well, they're not cattle farmers anymore. They're soil farmers. Their job's to look after the soil. The grass will then grow. The cows come in, mow the grass, and give them their, and pay the bills. Yeah. So it's actually that change of focus to being a soil farmer and looking after that. And that's been a conversation I started having with a lot of people as well, which is just, it's showing things are changing, in the larger scale agricultural industry as well, which, that was unheard of. That was witchcraft, not too many years ago.
Well, the way I like to see it is, if we're not building soil, we're only ever taking away, we're only ever extracting. So if we're not building soil, we're actually not gardeners, we're miners. So unless we're giving something back, which is one of the permaculture principles of fair share, unless we're giving something back, we're miners. And when I've said
brilliant.
I've said that at gardening clubs, and there's elderly people there who've been gardening for a very long time, who've maybe never made a compost pile, never put soil back in. And you see them sort of stare out the window like, oh, what have I been doing? It's like, sorry, Beryl, no, but you're not a miner. We just need to think more about the soil. And I think the soil is where everything is happening.
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of stuff that actually was going on, intergenerationally. When everyone had the garden in their backyard. Because that was to feed the family, because they didn't have the money to, you run down the shops. That was going to cost a fortune. It was where we are, in some ways in very fortunate times. What I know, talking to, family, was I was talking to my father-in-law about some different ideas, and, and he all of a sudden said, "Oh, we found out that was what my father was doing.
Wow.
His father was chop and drop, he was compost, he was everything else. And it wasn't because of anything. It wasn't because, it was the right thing to do. He didn't have the money for, different pesticides. He didn't have any other options.
Yeah.
But it worked, and it worked beautifully because there was that constant cycle through the system. It was obviously, it was what worked.
Yeah.
And then we kind of, chain hardware stores and garden shops and whatnot came around and said, this is what you need to do. Spray this on and you'll be sweet.
It was the fast food option.
It was the fast food option, 100%.
Big profits, but then also degradation over time. And it becomes a sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Where you've invested too much money into this cycle to actually try to get yourself out of it so you can just continue. It becomes a bit of a cognitive dissonance because you may believe that building soil is the best way to go, but you've just invested so much in the wrong way that you don't actually, and you can't actually pull yourself out. Yeah,
to actually get to that, at some point you've got to start admitting, you're going through that, insane cycle. Yeah, I keep on doing this and this. I want to do this, but I'm doing this instead.
There's also, you have to swallow your pride and and then do what the hippies did. It's you get a lot of people not wanting to go that way because it's seen as this sort of like green movement, hippie based. But you know what, the hippies are always right.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the other side of it too. There's really it doesn't have to be political. I agree with a lot of different ideals that the hippies had, and that idea, the nouveau hippie is certainly a new thing. It's not a new thing. It's continuing, and so now people are looking, they're looking more inwards, and actually seeing what they can do personally, the impact people have had themselves,
big time.
I think the last. The pandemic and whatnot has actually caused that to happen.
Yeah, the seedlings at all the agricultural stores and the hardware stores just got completely raided.
I was pretty excited by that, actually, personally.
I was too.
I started hearing about that.
I was extremely excited. I saw most of my gardening Facebook groups had just blown up with new members, and everyone's getting really excited and building raised garden beds. It's basically like victory gardens of World War II. People were just going, ham on these gardens. And one thing I was getting a bit concerned about with all these people doing seedlings is that how many of them are going to start realizing that they don't have the right soil type or they haven't been adding more minerals and nutrients. And then you saw a fork in the road between people who thought gardening wasn't for them and people who wanted to learn more when they started to see their seedlings falter, have pests or disease. And those people who stuck around were like, well, what am I doing wrong? And then it's like, well, if you made this compost pile, you put this, and this in it, and then it goes crazy. Put that on your garden. Yep. And then there's other people who have probably peeled off and go, I gave it a shot, but it didn't work out.
So I think one of the things that's happened through that pandemic as well is that people have been looking to do something a little bit different, and we're seeing that happen across the board. Like you're seeing it happen on Facebook groups and things like that too. For someone who hasn't necessarily started, where would you start? If someone came to you and said, Aaron, what should I do to start?
I always say make a compost pile.
Yep. And
I mean, compost is like, we're talking about soil. Making the compost pile is an art form.
Yeah.
Like you got to be the Bob Ross of compost, the art form that's long lost. And making a compost pile and just having all these amazing ingredients in it. Like I put in molasses and charlie carp and seaweed. Like seaweed's full of so many oceanic minerals. Like half of the minerals that we need for our garden are actually in seawater and seaweed.
Yeah.
They found like 150 minerals that if you pour with the right ratio of, I think it's like 1 part seawater to 50 parts rainwater, all those minerals that are in that seawater are much more biologically available for your plants. So seaweed, even a little bit of seawater. I make water-soluble calcium, so getting all my eggshells, putting them into an oven and baking them, and that loosens all the calcium bonds, and then I put it into vinegar, and it strips all the vinegar. The vinegar strips all the calcium out of those eggshells, and you get water-soluble vinegar, so it's ready to be taken up by the plants instantaneously.
That's awesome. That's certainly a new one for me, yeah.
Yeah, so then we also use paramagnetic basalt. So basalt is a volcanic rock, and it contains extremely low frequency light, so ELF, with the kids, we call it ELF energy, ELF. And the beautiful thing about paramagnetism is it encourages plant nutrient uptake through the roots. It encourages seed germination, and it sends microbes crazy, so they start doing their job a lot quicker. And ancient farmers knew about paramagnetism a long time ago. Whether you go from the pyramids or you go to like the Scottish towers, where they would find these enormous towers, which they think, oh, it must be a watchtower. It's not in a militarily strategic location whatsoever. They're at the bottom of valleys, and it's like, why would they put a guard tower in the middle, at the bottom of a valley? It's like ridiculous. The things don't even have stairs that go up to the top, really. Okay. And what they worked out was that the towers were made out of a paramagnetic rock on the outside, and then a diamagnetic rock on the inside. And what you're looking at is like an earth antenna. Yeah. And paramagnetism in large forms is known to bend the ionosphere down towards like mountaintops. And so if you make a pyramid out of it, you're basically bending cosmic energies down towards the pyramid. And then what have they got around those? They've got obelisks, which bend it further out from there. And then they put different types of totems in the garden, which bends it out further. And you start to see from Stone Age farming that people have been doing these practices. There's a guy called Phil Callahan who talks all about it. So putting paramagnetism into compost piles sends it crazy. Aloe vera, it's got salicylic acid in it, so it's a really fantastic one to have in there. Worm castings and worm juice, it's full of humic and fulvic acids, which are both positively and negatively charged. So minerals from both positive and negative can actually stick to it. Yeah. Lucin, it's got tricontinol in it. There's a whole recipe that we teach people how to make amazing compost piles and what additives to put into it. In my Permaculture Design Course that I'll be running in July, I give people a list called the Dirty 30. And it's all the different types of plants that you can put in and what their, little magical properties are. And I mean, if you go into the biodynamic world, I mean, we are going to be going to that a little bit more. We've got Kane from Red Soil Organics coming to have a chat. Kane's awesome.
About biodynamics.
Yeah.
So that's all really exciting. But sorry, I didn't want to.
I know.
Saying we're going to be talking more about that because it's such a huge area.
I can only touch on what biodynamics is about because it just blows your mind when you start talking about it. It's like you're talking about planets now. The thing I love about gardening is you can go as micro as macro as you want. You can go deep down into the microbiology and these tiny little critters all the way up through the different strata of the biologies and the climatology and meteorology and geology, and then you can go astrology. And
all the ologies.
And the beautiful thing is you can go out that far, and in biodynamics they talk about putting cow manure inside cow horns and burying it over winter.
I saw on your Facebook page that was what your wife wanted to do.
That's what you wanted to do for a birthday. Katrina, I love you. That's exactly what you wanted to do for your birthday. Awesome. And I was more than happy to oblige. We kneaded that cow poo for over half an hour and then put cow poo into those horns, and people go, why on earth are we putting cow poo into horns?
It was a lactating cow's horn?
Yeah, it's a lactating cow's horn, so you can actually see the growth rings every time it's given birth, and then when it finally passes at the end of its life, rather than discarding the whole cow, Rudolf Steiner in 1924 had this enormous lecture of how you can use all these different parts of the cow and with different parts, different plants, and how they affect different organs. They all have different resonances, you could say. So a yarrow might resonate with a particular part, an organ of a body, which is also the same resonance of a particular planet. And then those three, are part of the same sort of family, so to speak. And so you look at this cow horn, you go, why on earth are they putting cow poo in cow horns? There's an interesting thing that happens. If you've ever seen cows cudding.
Yeah. You have to go on a little bit more because...
Yeah. So when cows cudding, so it's a behaviour that cows do, they will eat grass for a long period of time, and then a certain period of the time in the day, they all sit down roughly at the same time, and they just sit there and they just chew like.
Yep.
And what they're doing is they're actually regurgitating all that grass that's in their stomach up into their mouth, and they're chewing it, and they're adding a lot of microbiology to it, and then breaking it down further, then swallowing it. And you think, okay, that's just a pretty stock standard habit that an animal might have, particular behavior. But it's not until you look at a lunar calendar that you can see in the lunar calendar that cows cud in accordance to moon phases.
Yeah.
And it's almost to like a 20-minute window of margin of error as to when they sit down.
That's incredible.
On that moon cycle, as you've got that moon cycle going along, cows cud.
So do you happen to know why that happens in that particular time?
No, but Rudolf Steiner will say that how do cows know when the moon's at a particular cycle, and his theory is that the cow's horns are actually antennae that can pick up on lunar phases, and then once you're burying manure into those antennae and putting it into the ground, you're putting it in on an inhale. So the winter is what they call an inhale, where it's pulling all of its energy down into the soil.
Yeah.
And those antennae are still responding to those cosmic movements. And then you bring that up at the end of winter, and you look at it. Not at the end of winter, so maybe like in your summer, spring, you bury them back up, or you dig them back up, and then you apply it like almost homeopathic doses in large foliar sprays over your entire crop system. And the funny thing is, there's probably people right now listening to this podcast and go, "This guy's full of crap."
Yeah.
The thing is, we can laugh at BioDynamics and their practices all day and all night, and I have. But you can't laugh at the results. The results,
and that's exactly right. It does sound, amazing. Like it was someone's mushroom trip that came up with the idea.
Yeah,
but it is. I've seen it myself. The difference is incredible. You can, as you said, you can't argue with the results.
No, I've been to biodynamic farms and I go, this soil's amazing.
Yeah.
What have you used here? And it's like, we just used cosmic forces. We did a couple of little practices and bit of this inside of a stomach lining of that, and I'm just like, whoa, you've lost me already.
Yeah.
But the results are there. Everything's vibrant. Everything's fresh, and it's phenomenal.
Okay, that's awesome, mate. I want to take a little bit of a turn because we're hitting that sort of point, mate. Where the we started talking before about the living classroom. So that's that's a great little system that's been set up for school kids. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works? We just want to touch on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the living classroom is like my three occupations all tied into one. I'm a nurse, I'm a teacher, and a gardener, all in the same thing. So we're teaching permaculture to kids in schools. And this isn't a new project. This is a project that's been happening for 18 years. It was started by my friends Aaron Sorensen and Dan Dayton down in Wollongong. And there was a school there called Cringilla Public School in 2003. And if you've ever been down to Wollongong, it's a huge steelworks and a big industrial area. And they had like heavy metal cadmium mountains that they just built a suburb on. And this is where Cringilla School was built. And the school caught on fire from all these toxic fumes and whatnot. And Dan and Aaron went in there and they got asked by big industry, can you do something about this?
So what were their qualifications?
So they're permaculturalists. They've got about 60 years of permaculture experience between them.
Yep.
And so then they built this amazing permaculture garden at Cringilla State School, public school, and from then it's just grown in the last 18 years. And permaculture pathways for kids have gone from primary school to high school to employment and secondary colleges, and it has just gone in leaps and bounds. And now we've got Vanessa Schofield on board, who's doing all the cooking. So we're tying all that in, and the kids are learning how to cook, and then they're composting all the food scraps. And the beautiful thing is we're here in Gympie, and the first living classroom that ever came to Queensland is in Gympie. It's at
Monkland State School.
Monkland State School.
Yeah.
Principal Ben Ryan, he had the vision to take the living classroom on, and he probably hadn't heard of it because it's very new to Queensland. And he's just taken it by the horns, and he's got an amazing program there, not just living classroom, but a whole outdoor learning education, which is what kids want to do.
Absolutely.
And now that we've been going at Monkland for over 3 years now, other schools are starting to jump on board. We've got Cran State School and North Arm State School, and then more are popping up in New South Wales as well. So it literally is germinating itself because teachers are craving this, and kids are craving it as well.
I can see kids getting a whole lot out of it. So shout out to Ben, you've done well, mate. That's it's such an exciting thing when kids start getting involved. It's not just in the garden, but when they come home, they're telling mum and dad about this stuff as well.
Exactly.
And there's been nothing more encouraging to a parent than their kid saying, "Hey, this is something I want to do."
And it goes back to that. My father's father's father, has been doing farming for so many years. If I was to go and tell that guy, "Hey, you should think about it a different way," we'd probably lock horns and he'd tell me to go away. In the nicest words, but
or not so much.
But if the kid's at the dinner table and says, "Hey, Dad, why don't we do it like this?" And it's like, "Oh, I knew I brought up a genius," And you get you change the system, so to speak, from the ground up, because the kids are where this country is going. So
100%, and it's obviously it's never been a more important time to be doing it. No. So so as far as that's covering where the kids are. Kids are starting to learn this sort of stuff at some schools, which is obviously great. As an adult, we can come along and do a permaculture design course.
Yep.
So you do them yourself. So can you just go through roughly, what's entailed with it?
Yeah. So I run a permaculture design course at our farm, Lulu's Perch in Pimbaran.
So we'll have links to all this in our on our story notes and all the various social channels as well.
Yeah, great. So everyone can click the links through there. I do it one weekend a month for 6 months, and the reason why I do that is so I encourage a local audience to come to these classes, so we can build a community, and also because I feel like adults don't often absorb information if it's given to them in an intensive 2-week course. By the second or third day, even me, I'm a teacher, information's just flying over my head and I'm missing out on really important stuff. So if it's just over a weekend, you're learning a lot. Anyway, I
got time to process it.
You got time to process it, and then you got a month to practice it.
Yeah.
So I've designed the course in step-by-step guide on what you should be doing now and what you should be doing in a month, and then 2 months and 3 months. So the first thing we do is obviously the ethics and principles, but then we go straight into the soil. Like I said, that's where the magic is. How to build soil. We're talking about all the different types of composting, biochar, brewing our own microorganisms. Like, we're literally going from the ground up. And I don't feel like we go forward until we know what soil is and the magic and the power of soil. And then we start reading the landscape, and then we're doing site analysis. We're going to different sites around the local area, seeing other permaculture farms, seeing other people who need consultancies done. So a lot of people come to me for permaculture consultancies. Yeah. I bring my whole class and we brainstorm and we come up with amazing ideas, and we think tank a permaculture design plan.
Yeah. That's a brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah, and the family who we're doing it for get an absolute kick out of it, because there's only so many ideas that I can come up with, and you're 15 people just really assessing the landscape.
I think that's just such a practical way of doing it too. For being able to have people rather than just come to your place and saying, this is how it's all set up and why I did.
Here's a blank canvas.
This is some struggles that might be here on this particular block. So how can we fix that?
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
It's all problem solving, teaching people how to do that, have a critical mind and problem solving abilities to start applying all the things that we've learned in previous lessons and start applying it to a blank canvas. Because it's one thing, sure, to see the end product and see the end result of a permaculture farm, but how did it get there? What did it look like when it was just lawn? Then what was the first thing that we did? What was the first earthworks and water harvesting and pioneer plants? What do we do first? And then they take that knowledge back to their own blank slates, their own blank canvases, and they feel much more confident when they go in there. Yeah,
certainly. So it really runs the whole gamut of what you can do, and then then still encouraging you to to be working with others as well, because I think you said it a second ago, you build that community.
Exactly.
And communities is such a huge part of the permaculture whole principle. behind it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, even this weekend, we'll be going out to a place where they marked out all the contours with the laser levels.
Yeah.
The earthworks have been done, and so that
we still can use technology. It's not just it's not
exactly.
just it's not just caveman stuff.
I find that earth movers and excavators are just like surgeon tools.
Yeah.
That we use to heal the land rather than clear fell it. So everyone will just learn the entire permaculture process from knowing absolutely nothing to going into their own garden and feeling confident. And not only that, but probably feeling confident that they can go and consult for somebody else.
Yeah, so that's amazing. So how long does that go for again, sorry?
1 weekend a month for 6 months.
For 6 months.
So it's a 6-weekend course,
a
72-hour permaculture course. And it's done in a way where it's actually, really quite consumable, and you can get a lot out of it and have time to practice things. And one of the permaculture principles is slow and small solutions. So I like to really slow down the course, despite, a lot of my students wanted to put pedal to the metal and just get in there and just rip up their whole garden. And then they get to the next weekend and like, oh, I should have waited for this weekend to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mate, look, it's been absolutely awesome talking to you. So thank you for coming along.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got just a wealth of information, mate. So, like I said, we'll have those details for how people can get in touch with you and get in touch with Lulu's Perch, and actually,
Lulu's Perch, Living Classroom. You'll find us all over YouTube and Facebook. Like, if you like comedy gardening, then you go to Lulu's Perch. If you want to see schools be transformed from concrete slabs into thriving permaculture gardens, then Living Classrooms. And we're always looking for people to partner with, businesses within local areas. We want them to be a part of those videos that we make. So if there's any sponsors out there that are looking to be a part of this new movement of kids learning outdoors with permaculture, we're all ears.
Yeah, that's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, mate. But we've gotten to the point where I go through thing I ask every guest. I've got my 6 in 60.
All
right, so it's six questions. You've got 60 seconds to answer all of them.
Holy moly!
So nice, quick fire questions.
Okay.
All right, you good to go?
I think so.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So what's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Laziness, and also getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why I do it. My body just does it.
The early rise.
I have like from 4 to 8 o'clock just to do what I want to do. And I'm very productive.
Unreal. Okay. So what's the best advice you've ever received?
Live the dream within your means.
Nice. Oh, you get some of the really, really cool, personal phrases from people. This is brilliant. So what's the one thing you're most fired up about today?
Planting a seed in the hearts of all those listeners out there.
Oh, nice. You're going to make me cry.
And also,
That's
yeah.
Okay. And if you could recommend one book or podcast to our listeners, what would it be and why?
I think I've got 2 books. One would be Mycelium Running by Paul Stamets, and then The Secret Life of Plants. Nice. That's wild. If you're ready for your mind to be blown, then it'll blow.
All right. Awesome. What personal goals are you hoping to achieve in the next 12 months?
To be a good father. I've got a baby on the way, and a good husband.
Lovely. Mate, the last one's the question, the mystery question you don't know anything about. But what inanimate object would you eliminate from existence if you could?
Oh, that's a really hard one. What inanimate object? Let's put in some chaos. The brake pedal.
The brake. Oh, mate, I love it. No, mate, that's absolutely brilliant, mate. Look, Aaron, thank you again so much for coming along and having a chat with us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, mate. Is there anything that we haven't really touched on today that you wanted to specifically share with our listeners?
No. The Living Classroom, Lulu's Perch. If you guys are interested in starting your permaculture journey with us today, come join my course. Or if you've got a school and you're a teacher and you want to know more about permaculture and connecting it to the curriculum, speak to us at the Living Classroom. Fantastic, mate. Thank you. We'll have all your details on the website and the socials. Excellent. And with that, we bid you adieu. See you guys. I really hope you enjoyed that. I know I certainly learned a lot. It was great chatting with Aaron about permaculture and whatnot that we did. If you'd like to follow him on Lulu's Perch, make sure you do. Also, make sure you like, share and subscribe. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify and also Apple Podcasts. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Ciao for now.